to this exciting episode of the Admiral's Almanac. This is a first time ever. I'm here with a fellow podcaster, Carrie Brett. And Carrie is the author of the amazing book, Shot at Love. Shot at Love. Carrie is an amazing photographer, podcaster, and author. And Carrie, tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Carrie Brett. I'm a Boston celebrity photographer. I worked at the Improper Bostonian magazine, which is a leading city magazine in Boston, for 28 years, photographing all sorts of people, actors, influencers, people that people want to get to know. And you would think my life was very exciting and life on the red carpet was amazing and all the things, but I got divorced with a baby 20 years ago. And then this was before cell phones, and some people had cell phones or dating apps. And I had a lead singer come into my studio and I photographed him. And this is not my standard studio policy, but we started dating and we lived together for 8 years. The bottom fell out abruptly, as it does for some. And I had a very young photography assistant who put me on Tinder. And I became an early evolution dating app user. And my whole world changed because I realized that your online dating profile was no different than a cover of a magazine. And it was branding 101, personal branding. And that was something that I was an expert in. The publication that I worked for was a free publication. We moved 1 million magazines a month. And my job was to have, say, where 150,000 people walked by a street corner, I had to make an image so strong that they would stop, bend down, and pick up the cover. And that allowed me to keep my job, which I just really needed to keep because that was I thought at the time, only talent. And I was a single mom. So when I realized that stopping people in their tracks to look at a cover was the same as an online dating profile, I became obsessed. And I also, being an early evolution dating app user, I really didn't have a lot of competition because a lot of people were at 43 back in the day, and I had some great images, and it was trial and error. I found love online, became a Tinder success story, and then I was helping people because when people come to your studio, there's a transition in their life. They're either looking for a new job, they are getting divorced, they've lost somebody, they're taking care of. Now it's time for them. So I turn into this healer / photographer every time I do a session. And I kept helping people. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. Writing a book is very hard to do and that's a whole other game. So I had a Hollywood producer friend of mine say to me, why don't you start a podcast? So for the past 5 years, I've hosted a show. The book came first, just came out recently. My show is 5 years old. I'm a 9-time award-winning host, and I've learned an awful lot, so I'm happy to share.
Wow, 9-time award-winning host. I have a podcast, and so if you're listening to this episode on Carrie's podcast, A Shot of Love, you don't know me. My listeners do know me. I'm Rear Admiral Garry Hall, world-famous helicopter pilot, adventure sportsman, world traveler, etc., etc., etc. My podcast is the Admiral's Almanac, the wit and wisdom of Rear Admiral Garry Hall. And so I bring leaders of all walks of life into your life. And so it's a leadership podcast. So right now, dear listeners, we are live in a conference room at the Intercontinental Hotel at CreativeCon 2025. It's an assembly of creators of all walks of life. We have musicians, poets, authors, podcasters, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a wonderful conference. Carrie, and the title of this talk is Start a Podcast Anywhere and Build a Loyal Audience. I'm going to help with starting the podcast anywhere, and Carrie is going to talk about building a loyal audience. Right now, we're just using a Rode product that fits in your pocket. I know you can't see it because this is audio, but the Rode Micro Mini wireless microphones. And so that we're talking right into my cell phone. So if you wanted to start a podcast, all you need is a few bucks, $149 to buy a wireless microphone set. Use the free apps on your phone, and we're using right now Rode Reporter. A little bit later in this podcast, we will switch over to a Zoom P4 recorder with SM58 microphones, professional microphones. But Carrie, tell us why you started a podcast. I know you just gave us a long story, but why the podcast?
I really believed that if I could build a brand with the podcast and build an audience, that someone would come looking for the book. And I really, truly wanted to help people. I wanted to give people information that I didn't have because online dating was new. And still to this day, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and no one knows what's going on and no one knows what's happening. And I found myself in situations because I had no strategy and no information, and I got hurt a lot. And one time I hurt someone without even knowing because it was too soon for me to date. I don't know what hurt worse, unintentionally hurting someone or having myself get hurt. I knew that people were in pain a lot. And I thought if I could help one person with my show, then it would be worth all my efforts. And I was a professional photographer. I was so nervous speaking into the microphone for the first time. I swear I should have, it was so humbling. And I keep the first episodes so that you can go back and you can hear me talk very monotone. The thing about me is that I know who I am, and in order to stay grounded in the celebrity world for as long as I have, I understood what was important. And I wanted to have real purpose in my life. And it was really important to me. So that's my why.
If you want to start a podcast, you need to think about your why, and you need to just start. And as Carrie said, she keeps her first episode to go back and remember when she first started. The first time you hit record on a podcast, you get a little bit of the jitters or the microphone frights. But once you get going, it makes a difference. But there's the author of 4-Hour Work Week. Tim Ferriss, if you're familiar with him. He started a podcast, and it's behind Joe Rogan, but it's a tremendous podcast. But what he said was, get a setup like this. And we're using wireless microphones to an iPhone 15 using Rode Reporter app, and commit to 6 episodes. And once you've done 6 episodes, you'll have a feel for which direction you're going to go. You're going to figure out what format you're going to go. So the reason I started a podcast was a couple of reasons. One, for you that are listening, you can't see that I'm in my 70s, but I spent 39 years in the United States Navy, met leaders from all walks of life, both good leaders and bad leaders, and I wanted to share that wisdom. Also, at some point in my life, I'm going to go on my final deployment over the horizon, never to return. And I wanted to have an archive of my voice, my lessons, my experience to pass on to my children and grandchildren. Carrie, is your podcast helping your book sales or book promotion?
I just launched, the fifth anniversary of my show, Shot at Love, just happened on Single Awareness Day, which is also Valentine's Day. And I did a 10-day push for press and just launched on Valentine's Day and then came here. So I haven't even had time to sell the book on the show, but I will, obviously. And I'm not sure. So what my idea is, and this is what's so cool about podcasting, is that you can create all sorts of things. So this is going to be, a lot of the guys that I dated in the book, their names have been changed to protect the innocent or not so innocent. But there's other amazing characters in the book because it happens all at my magazine. So there are a lot of celebrities that ended up being my friends who helped me, saved me from myself. And so I thought, now everyone in Boston knows all these players. So one of the people in the book is Julian Edelman. He's a famous football player. And I thought, wouldn't it be incredible to do a Shot at Love spotlight series where the original characters in the book, so if people really love the book, they want to know more about these people. and why they're so fascinating, why they happen to be, I'm lucky enough to be friends with them. So I'm going to bring them in. This time I'm going to bring a video so that now they all have big platforms, and I'll splice up that video. And those segments will be picked up by the press because they're celebrities. Some of them, a lot of them. So celebrity sells. But, and I'm going to talk about this later. My magazine closed in 2019. I don't have a whole magazine getting me celebrities anymore. Do I want to get celebrities all the time? No, I want to get the best content for my show. But have I gotten celebrities just being me? Yes. How did I do it? And I'm going to teach you how to do it as well, because I think a lot of people want to learn. Tim Ferriss was someone before he was Tim Ferriss. Same with Mel Robbins. Same with my publisher at my magazine went to high school with Joe Rogan. So all these people are regular people who put effort and got some breaks along the way. And we're no different. We built our show from the ground up with no help and really no knowledge.
And some of the people in the room with us here today have never started a podcast but want to start a podcast. So just do it. You know, the Nike, just do it. In fact, while I was driving here to Creative Con 2025, I was pulled over by a police officer. Took my license and he said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "No, I'm not sure." And he said, "You were speeding." And I said, "No, I wasn't speeding. I was just trying to keep up with traffic." And the police officer said, "When I pulled you over, there was nobody around you." And I said, "I know. See how far behind I am?" Thank you. Hopefully you can hear the laughter in the audience. It's amazing. Everybody feels like they're too far behind. Oh, all the podcasts have been started. All the books have been read.
Yeah.
All the websites have gone. There's no money for me on the internet. There's probably about 2 million podcasts out there, and probably 1.5 million of those have 2 episodes or less, or they're terrible episodes. Start, and there's so many free applications out there for you to improve your podcast. You can record with, like I said, a free app on your iPhone. Again, improve, or your Android phone. Improve with a wireless microphone or attached microphone rather than using your phone's microphone. Then you can edit it in GarageBand, a free application on your computer. And then you can run it through Auphonic. So that's, I won't spell it, but auphonic.com, you can run it through there. It'll take out background hum. It'll take out noise. It'll level your guests and make a big difference. And then if you don't want to pay for a hosting, you can put it on YouTube for free. So that's how you can get started for free. So Carrie, where do you host your podcast?
So I host my podcast in my studio, and I could improve the audio. I'm learning. I just did the audio of my book, and I did it in my daughter's closet that I soundproofed from Guitar Center. Had flashbacks of dating a musician while I was in there. But anyways, no offense, Jeff. I'm just kidding. So I have a setup like that, a portable setup when I travel. And I've done it a few times. But there's a lot it's not as complicated as you think. But I think there's a lot more than the technical that go into the show. And I know that when I started a podcast, everyone would say to me, "Oh, everyone has a podcast." Literally everyone said that to me. And I live in a town of 30,000 people. I'm still the only one person in my town who has a podcast. Okay? And that's not true. And I also heard when I was pitching my book, and there was various forms of it, I heard, "People will never care about your story. No one cares about your story." I'm like, I think someone will. Because I know that I would be the first one in the bookstore buying every book for all my single friends and myself, because I created a book that I desperately needed 10 years ago. People are going to tell you, "No, you can't get this person." I'm telling you, with the right pitch, someone sent Tom Hanks a typewriter and he's agreed to come on the show. And I have some really wild stories that if we have time, I'll share with you. But it's just someone who wouldn't take no. I'm only someone who wouldn't take no for an answer. That's really the difference.
In an earlier seminar, we talked about yeses and nos. And I'll tell you right now, as we tell our children, don't you say no, let somebody else say no.
That's
So
right.
ask if you want, talking about getting a guest on your show, you ask, and most likely they'll say yes. If you say, can I just have 15 minutes of your time?
Right. See, here's the thing is that fear stops you, right? Fear stops you in online dating. All the no's, and people don't want to talk. Trust me, I've been interviewed by no one knows what to do with me because online dating and rejection and all those things are uncomfortable things for people to talk about. And I got to such a low that I had to talk about it because I needed to fix my life. And it's scary to ask someone to come on your show. But the good news is two things can happen. Hi, Julie, looking. You can there's two things. They're going to say yes or they're going to say no. Okay. All right. They say no and they don't respond to you. They miss being interviewed by you. Okay. The other thing is when you're live with somebody, when you meet them, I'm here right now. It's going to be a lot easier. Gary, you look like $1,000,000. Would you love to come on my show? Chances are he's going to
Yeah.
say, I loved you. I loved what you said in this program. We have so many similarities in our life, whatever I say. Would you do it at that time? He's a very busy man. He's got grandchildren, an amazing resume in life. We've had to set up phone calls and it's like a month later because we're both very busy people. But if we got that, you had a calendar link on your phone how's next Tuesday for you? Great. That's how I got stars. I would show up at premieres, follow them I wouldn't recommend this, but follow them to the bathroom, wherever they are. Hi, big fan. Would you be interested? And I did it then. But I did it because I had to do it because I was a single mom and I needed to keep my job. So I got tough. But you want to have a good show, right? So don't be afraid to ask.
Yes, and you talked about having a schedule app. I recommend Calendly because then you could set up a time frame from which you want to record. You could say, I want to record on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm open from noon until 4 o'clock. That way you can say to somebody, here's my Calendly link. Go and tell me when you want to be on my show. Another thing about having a podcast is I'm sure everybody mingles. You go to social events, you go to different things, you go out to dinner, and you have a conversation. And I go, you know what? We talk about that on my podcast. Why don't you come on my podcast? But if you're a nerd that wants to mingle, if you have a podcast, you can at least say, oh, we talk about that on my podcast. And here's what people will say. You have a podcast?
Mhm.
And yes, I do. Again, we've mentioned using simple ways to get started, a phone app on your Android or iPhone, a wireless microphone, and then there's apps out there, Auphonic, to improve your audio. There's hosting sites, there's editing sites, all that you can do at low or no cost. At this point in the conversation on today's episode of Shot at Love and the Admiral's Almanac, a combined podcast here at Creative Con 2025. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about building a loyal audience. But what we're going to do is we're going to stop this recording and switch to another set of microphones and recorder just so you can see if it sounds any different or how much money you have to invest. Okay, we're continuing our podcast on how to podcast remotely, how to podcast in any location, and how to build a loyal audience. And I'm here with Carrie Brett, the author of Shot at Love, and we've switched equipment to a Zoom P4 and two professional microphones that every singer uses on stage. Carrie, how do we start building a loyal audience?
Okay. What I did was I found people that I was obsessed with, and I hope to God that my audience felt the same way. Now, I did things very unconventionally. I got a big television spot in Boston when I really didn't know what I was doing. And like when you go back and watch it, you can watch it. It's on a Chronicle. And I'm like deer in the headlights, but I crack up at it because it was good enough. I'm a perfectionist. But I only had 6 episodes and I got a lot of press. And I actually got the original Hitch of the movie Hitch. You guys know that movie that Will Smith played? Okay. His name is Jordan Harbinger. He has probably 20 million downloads a month. So I stumbled upon him on a photographer's podcast that I was listening to. And I'm like, this guy sounds just like me, like a total, we're aligned. So I listened to it and I put in the body of the email, the message, like, what's this email about? I put doing step aerobics while downing Crystal Light because he said that in an interview. And I thought it was funny. And I'm like, he must be my age if he's drank Crystal Light and did step aerobics. So I wrote this pitch that was really heartfelt and funny. He has 20 million downloads a month. He wrote me back right away. And he came on my show. Now I spent a lot of time researching him. I wrote all my questions out, 5 million questions. I get on, hi, Jordan. I'm freaking out, shaking. He gets on. Now I'm in the ring with a real seasoned podcaster. I took all my questions. I threw them right over my shoulder and I'm like, let's go. Because you have to have, he has his questions, right? But the magic in the show is when you really just are open and you let the conversation go where it's going to go. And you say whatever you want to say, but you shouldn't say, and you say it anyways. And so all these things I've learned by taking a chance, taking risks, not being afraid, getting over myself, and trying. And each and every one of us are able to do that. We're all born with the same mind and same abilities.
No, I think having some prepared questions may help you at least organize your thoughts. Also, organize you so that you get over your fear of having the conversation when really you should be listening.
Right.
You listen and then be yourself, as Carrie said, use humor, say outrageous things to very shy people and get their reaction. I did have one question from the audience and said the first part of the recording, was that on Zoom or video or audio only? It was audio only, and we were using an iPhone, a smartphone, with the Rode Reporter application, a free application. So RODE Reporter. But that's a good question. Right now, we're just talking about audio podcasting, and you can, once you get going, start off with audio, and then you can go to YouTube and learn how to do video podcasting.
Gary, I just want to share a tip of something that I've learned, and I think it's valuable. So I was outside talking to Dominic Damasky earlier today, and later today, I'm doing a program with Dr. Tanji about what to wear to impress and all that. And now I have a stylist background. I photograph celebrities, like I mentioned. And he said, what do you think about the clothing? I said, I think how you make someone feel is the most important thing. And so when you're interviewing someone, they want to know that you read their book or you know a little bit about them and that you care, that different people, if they're going to give their time to go on your show, they want to know, they don't want to be given the canned answers that they've given on previous episodes. So it's very important to do your research and to be unique and create original content because you want them to like you and have good chemistry. And so the bigger names that I've had on my show, 99% of them will never do a pre-interview call. So you got to find a way. I interviewed Natalie Liu, who had millions of followers. Her book saved my life, 100%. I was obsessed with her. Her book was called Mr. Unavailable and the Fallback Girl. My Hollywood producer said, she's so big, she'll never come on your show. I said, she absolutely will, because she's a fallback girl just like me. And sure enough, I got her on my show. She wasn't going to do a pre-interview call. I had a ruptured disc. I was like in so much pain. I did it anyways because I was afraid I'd lose her. And the first thing I said, I did this glowing introduction that I was a total fangirl. And then I just said, cue up the Milli Vanilli, because I knew she put up these dance videos of Milli Vanilli. And she said, and she's British, and she said, oh, Carrie, I love you already. And I was like, I got her. So that's how you have to connect really quickly when you start, in the beginning of that episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you podcast, what it's going to do for you personally is develop your interview style, but more importantly, your listening style.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, if you do deep research on a guest, you can find something out about their youth that will really connect with them. It's almost like the movie. I'm going to cut that out because I forget the movie. Anyway, you connect with somebody in their beginnings. When you interview a celebrity, at one point, he or she was in high school doing goofy stuff. So if you talk about that, it connects with your audience, that people that are successful. It's interviewing. I've interviewed CEOs and very successful people, but then I ask them, how did you get started and what they did in college or in high school? I say, how did you in Poughkeepsie, New York, from that high school wind up as CEO of this company? And it's because when you're young, when you're 22 and you meet somebody that's a CEO, you go, I'll never get there. And then you find out they're goofier than you are. Go back to the beginning of somebody's story. But again, work on your questions, work on your research, and work on your listening skills.
A couple of times today, we had issues. It's dry. So I started coughing. We'll edit that out. Am I going to cry and fall apart? You can't. Okay. It's happening in real time. So I coughed. I took a glass of water. It was okay. This guy is higher up. No one's as high as him in the world as far as
It's a very small world.
But what is endearing to me was when I don't know the name of that movie. I'm going to cut it out. So no matter what you do, we're all people. And sometimes when those moments happen in a show, that's when the audience really leans in. And then you see, oh my God, they're really a human being. They really have feelings. They feel the same way as me. And it connects you to the audience. It really does. And my flawedness, which there's plenty of, actually became the secret sauce of my show because I learned it, and I'll keep this quick. I learned this when I interviewed Ellen Hildebrand. Do you guys know the #1 Netflix show, The Perfect Couple? Nicole Kidman's in it. Did you guys see it? Okay. She wrote that book, and she wrote 25 best-selling New York Times books. Her book, Summer of '69, beat Where the Crawdads Sing, okay, to #1. She's big. And I interviewed her in Beacon Hill, and we started talking. She started talking about her ex-husband, and I said, you're like Demi Moore and Bruce Willis. This is amazing. And I was like, I shouldn't have said that. That was insulting. People loved it. People stopped me all over town. They're like, oh my God, I laughed out loud when you said that. And when I realized that I said what was in the back of my head, people just like, you just laughed. I'm like, Carrie, don't say it. Don't say it. I said it. Oh my God, I said it. I'm like, okay, my editor can cut it. But that's the stuff that people love. Bridget Jones, like, think about this flawedness, and we're all, it's hard. I work in a world of perfection, making people look better, but it's a lie, essentially. So
We could try and make me look better, but it's not only a lie, it's impossible. But I had a question. How do you categorize your podcast? And I think you've got to think about your own personality and what you may want to talk about. It might be a subject you're interested in. It might be a course you're taking in college that really resonates, and so you want to talk about that. But I wouldn't get too wrapped around that, because as you start, you will evolve and you'll know what category to put your podcast in. And then another question is, how important is the name and logo of your podcast? I think it is important. It's got to be catchy, but I wouldn't overthink it. I came up with the Admiral's Almanac, and then I just went to Fiverr and you just go to Fiverr and find somebody who does podcast logos. And I said, I want an anchor. I want some disruptive C, and I want this on it. And so I went, okay, Fiverr, that's a good enough product. In fact, for my book, Navigating Leadership, I used Fiverr to create the cover. Use a service like that. And then what metrics matter for podcasting? That's a great question, and many people have asked it before. It's like the show Only Murders in the Building, where Steve Martin and Martin Short, they go, oh, we've got 20 downloads. And then they meet a couple of guys who are gardeners, and they've got 10,000 downloads. So as I said I do a radio show with a priest. And I said, if we are going to have a lecture on the rosary in the gathering center of the church Saturday night at 5 o'clock. If 10 people showed up, we'd be lucky. But if we had 50 downloads, that's like having a meeting with 50 people. So I wouldn't, think that you're not being successful if you only have 100 downloads because you've reached 100 people.
I just want to mention something that was very moving this morning with David Metzler. And people said I was brought to tears. I was crying. I found it so powerful. But he's someone who has a huge audience, speaks all over 200 times a year, and numbers and outreach, but he doesn't care. He cares about the 400. So it doesn't matter. This is the thing about podcasting. These are people who will stay with you, talk about you, buy your services. They drink the Kool-Aid, and it's small but mighty. And it really is. I'm still doing it. It's 5 years. It's very powerful.
We got a great question here. How long did it take you to launch your podcast?
Oh, okay. So I had a Hollywood producer in the beginning that was going to start a network based on my show. We worked together a long time in Hollywood and back and forth, New York, all that. Turns out the pandemic happened and we're still friends, but that happened for whatever reason. I was supposed to be a lone wolf and have my show myself. And I worked a year with him and his team, writing out a bunch of ideas. And to me, it was a complete waste of time. I think every day that goes by, every hour that goes by, you're losing downloads. And so just create content. If you like it, someone else is going to like it, and keep putting out what you like. And that's exactly what I do with my covers. When I would shoot, I look at thousands of images and I'm like, that's the cover. I don't really care who likes it. That's the cover. And that's what I do with my book. I shot it myself on a tripod with a cable release because I know who I am and I wanted to shoot it myself. Did I get a committee? My own mother was like, I don't like it. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
We love our mothers. So yeah, how long did it take you to launch? I think you can go to the free app Canva and go, I want to do a podcast logo, and Canva can produce one for you to get you going. Again, I think you should go with that, commit to 6 episodes, and you should sit down and think, okay, what are my 6 episodes going to be? Or if you have ChatGPT, you can say, I'm a quilter and I like a Barina sewing machine. Give me 6 topics that would be great for a podcast to talk about my sewing. I don't have a Barina. I can't afford it. But anyway, I have made 8 quilts, all for my children and grandchildren, and that's another story. And did you have any setbacks? I've got a great setback story. So I'd been giving a lecture for over 35 years to companies, squadrons, to people in the military, people in the community, and it was called Desire, Commitment, Responsibility, and Accountability, and then creating your message, communicating your message. And I turned that into my very first podcast. And I just had a medical procedure. And if anybody's ever had a medical procedure and you've been under anesthesia, when you sign out, they say, don't make any decisions today. Don't sign any documents. Don't drive a vehicle. So I'm sitting at home and I go, I think I'm going to launch my podcast. And I'm feeling really still in the bliss of anesthesia. And I went, I think I'm going to call it Leadership, Fitness, and Sex. And then I'm going to say it has nothing to do with fitness or sex, but now that I have your attention, I'll talk about leadership. In fact, I used that title when I was asked to speak to 40 priests from the Diocese of Washington, D.C. Well, what was my position at that time? I was a special assistant to the President of the United States for national security. And so I launched my podcast with that title without consulting my wife. The next morning, I walked into my office in the Eisenhower building, which is just right next to the White House, and there were people waiting for me. Admiral Hall, what the heck did you do last night? Because I was being attacked in Politico, Mother Jones, Wall Street Journal. What is this man doing in the White House? How did he get there? What's going on? What does he know about national security? I went, okay, I'll take it offline. So then I tried to figure out how to delete everything from the internet. And that set me back 2 years until I left the White House. And then I started up again. Yeah, when you get lectured by the chief of staff of the president of the United States, you tend to listen to their advice.
Yeah.
So that was a major setback. Have you had any major setbacks, Carrie?
You have to realize I was dismantling shame around joining a dating app a long time ago. When I would call television or radio stations, no one wanted to touch it. And they said, this is career suicide, Carrie, for you. And I said, I really think actually it's going to be the best thing I ever did. And I believe that in my heart. And so people would say, oh, you're going to have all these like sex stories. And so literally, I didn't want that. And I've been getting a lot of people who have been reading the book. They're like, oh, you're like Chelsea Handler. And I'm like, what? There's literally not one sex scene in my entire book because I say it's like Sex in the City, an Irish Catholic version of Sex in the City, because there can't be any sex because I'm Irish Catholic. I play on it. But a lot of the times, I don't know what's going to happen on my show because you really don't know because people don't do the research on you and they don't know what they're going to say. But you can cut it. You can edit it. And I got to the point as I got more experienced when things went crazy. I'm like, you know what? Keep it in. And I don't do things for shock value, but I'm very honest. And I have one story that I thought, I can't believe this has happened. Do you guys know who Lenny Clark is? His name is called Crazy Town by Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon gave him the name Crazy Town. And he came on my show. I won an award with it, actually. And I had to do 2 episodes. He sat there and talked for 2 hours. It was so crazy. And it was so wild. He started with, I'm hot in the villages in Florida, and I never thought I'd be doing so well in adult porn. I'm like, that's it. This is crazy. What happened? My parents laughed. I thought I'm definitely going to be like my siblings won't talk to me. My daughter won't talk to me. My family laughed so hard about it, and it was so well received because the message was about overcoming and suffering and turning your life around. And so you have to be open. You have to be open to the unexpected because the unexpected can be really powerful.
That's beautiful. Greg asked the question, what is your creative process? And I think listening, I always say I do my best thinking in the shower. And now that I have a tankless water heater, I'm a near genius. But talk to people, listen to people, and your creative juices Leonardo da Vinci had what he called soft thinking. Don't overthink it. Just ponder your creative process, what you want to do, and an answer will come. Hard thinking is if you're doing calculus or physics or something like that, trying to solve a problem. But I think if you do use soft thinking, images, creative thoughts will come to you. And also talking to people. Once you have a podcast, it stirs up conversation. People might mock you and go, oh, you have a podcast, Gary? What's it about? And I go, it's about leadership. And I think you'd be a great guest because you're a great leader. Yeah. Okay. Just blow cool smoke up their pant leg and they'll come on your show. So this is a hard one. What event would you say has defined or helped you visualize who you are? I grew up in a family where my father put the funk in dysfunction and my mother put the fun in dysfunction. And so I think my childhood developed me to get out, escape from a weird family. I sought attention. I was an amateur magician, a ventriloquist, a jokester. And so, close-up magic. I was always doing close-up magic. I don't know how many sponge bunnies I gave to young girls at Hood College, but that's another story for another time. Sorry, Darlene. So all events in your life will define who you are. As we say, as adults, we recover from our childhood, spending our entire adult life doing that. So did somebody else slide me a question?
I think when podcasting, you're doing something out of the box. And So when you do something that's scary to other people, it's scary to try something new. But I was at chemo with my mom and I was getting ready to launch the book and she's getting chemo and she's, haters are going to hate. And she's saying that because she's afraid of what's going to happen with the book. I said, Mom, I think the book is going to be as well received as the podcast. Did you ever think that would happen? But to her, it's very scary. And as a parent, she's trying to protect me. And my mentor is on an island in St. Croix, made a ton of money when I was bedridden with my daughter 21 years ago. He said, sell everything you have now and buy Apple stock, because I just did. I'm here and he's on an island. So, and it was because my father said he didn't understand what Apple was. And he said, those aren't the types of stocks you should try. So the people that you love are going to say, they're not giving you the best advice all the time.
Yeah, they want to protect you and keep you safe and not take chances. So I got a great question is, what do you send prior to your interview, agreements or anything legal? What I have found that when I've been guests and I get sent legal documents, I go, whoa, what am I getting into? So I think as you start off, I don't think you need any sort of agreements or whatever. You might just say, okay, we're going to record audio and video, but I'm only going to put audio on the air. I'll edit out anything that you don't like. I'll share it with you before I post it. It all depends. You can tell a person's personality whether they need assurances that if they say something wrong, you will take it out. But I'll tell you, most people are happy to just come on. If they've listened to an episode or two, they're happy to come on your show and tell their story or get their message out there. So do you send any legal statements?
No, and think about it. Everything, my business revolves around the copyright. But they can take a photograph they can take a screenshot of the image that appears on the cover and it's still all over the internet. And podcasting is something that moves very fast. And there's no way I could do all the things if I was bogged down with all these releases and all these things. I think it's impossible. So I worried about a lot of things in my book, and everything I worried about never happened. Like it was fascinating. So it was because I never wrote a book before. So that was something new. So it's like part 2 of the podcast. So I think that is not something to worry about.
Yeah, so we're about running out of time, so we'll wrap it up. Yes, you can make money with your podcast. It might be to advertise your business or your service or something along those lines, but don't finance your car based on you're going to make money from your podcast. I think the takeaway is you can start with your phone attached to a good microphone. You can use free services like free recording apps, Auphonic for equalization, GarageBand for editing, and you can get started for a low dollar amount. But I think you need to be committed. You need to be committed to do 6 episodes. So use services like Fiverr, like Canva, things of that nature to get your logo and that going. And you can always change it, improve it as you go along. But you never know where your podcast is going to go. As I said, 3 of my most popular episodes were with a Catholic priest, and because of that, we were then asked to be on CatholicRadio.com doing a weekly show together where I'm the curious Catholic and he's the priest with a sacred doctorate in theology, and you never know where it's going to take you.
I agree, and I just learned this. I did a lot of press within 10 days prior to Valentine's Day, and I was asked to come on WBZ AM at 10 o'clock on Valentine's night, and I hadn't seen my boyfriend, and I did not want to do that spot. I was exhausted, and I knew that I was just beyond the outreach. And my boyfriend said to me, I don't think you're really in a position to say no to press, which was true. So there's a little Irish guilt on me. And then the person who interviewed me said to me, Carrie, you never know who's listening. And I believe that with online dating, because people say, you just don't know who's going to show up on that date. You just don't know. But I think the important thing here is that I have been told since the very beginning that I won't make any money with my book. I'm going to Tinder with it and Netflix. And and it will be the death of me trying. And so if I don't sell out all my books here, I'm going to the dentist convention and I'm going to move them like hotcakes right across the way. I think you have to have that attitude that I've figured out so many different ways to monetize my show because I had to, because it takes away from my photography. So I couldn't just do it. I had to make money doing it. And so a friend of mine who's in the book, chapter 8, he said, how's the book sales going? He's Mexican. He lives in New Mexico. And I said, send me one of those. He has these funny Mexican videos he sends me about how hard he works on his job. It's funny and stuff. I said, send me that video because that's probably what I'm going to have to do, but I'll do it because I'm that passionate about it. And I believe my book will help people. So if you have to match the passion, we talked about this last night. Remember?
Yes.
Remember, I should say.
You have to have passion. So if you're listening to this episode on Shot at Love, thank you, Carrie, for having me on board. It's been a real pleasure. And if you're listening on the Admiral's Almanac, Carrie, thank you for joining us as a guest. You've been an absolute delight. Look for her book on Amazon, Shot at Love by Carrie Brett, and her podcast is by the same name, Shot at Love. So you tell your audience what my podcast is.
I will, but before you leave, would you ever think about coming on my show as a guest?
Oh, absolutely. So once you start your podcast, people will be asking you to be on their podcast. So from the Admiral's Almanac, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We forgot to do our call sign Viper, call sign shooter.